Welcome into Player Profiler News Prime Time on Player Profiler Now Plus. I'm your host, Mike Lindberg, and with me, as always, is my co-host Jeremiah Retzlaff. What is going on, Coach? How you doing today?
Man, I tell you what, if I was any better, I would be twins. I mean, just ready to talk some news and best ball and news.
Yeah, man.
That's how
Yeah,
that's how I do because I'm Coach Retzlaff.
yeah. You like your underdog. You like your ADPs and everything along those lines, Coach. I'm ready to rock and roll with the top stories. Are you, buddy?
Absolutely, I've been ready.
Let's go. All right. Well, the Cincinnati Bengals are making big moves this offseason, securing a long-term commitments from both their star wide receivers, Jamar Chase and Tee Higgins. Jamar Chase gets 4 years, 161 million and 112 guaranteed, making him the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. To go along with it, Tee Higgins gets a 4-year deal, 115 million, and the first 2 years are guaranteed, making him the highest paid wide receiver too in NFL history. For Bengals fans, this is a welcome turn of events after a quiet start to free agency, offering a renewed sense of optimism with Burrow's supporting cast secured. The Bengals now can focus on filling the gaps in their rosters. I mean, it's going to be tough now with such draft capital and, contracts, loomed up for the next little while. They're going to have a hard time getting players there to sign for a decent amount of money here. So, Chev, what are your thoughts after the long-term contracts being locked in? How does this impact their fantasy value this upcoming season? Lock and loaded now?
It's Coach. I now Grindberg. I would like to talk to you about the current ADP of Tee Higgins and what this could mean moving forward for the Cincinnati Bengals in 2025. So, right now, currently, you've got Jamar Chase, who is the 101 in underdog and best ball drafts. And you have Tee Higgins at the 25th pick, the second pick or the first pick of the third round. So, I would like to personally, I think that the value there, you can't really have any sort of value. You're buying what I would like to say is a falling knife. So I can't be in on either one of those guys at cost in currently in best ball drafts.
Yeah, I mean, they're a tough sell. The 101 for Jamar Chase, he had a prolific year last year, but I mean, when you think about, T. Higgins missing a bunch of time as well, both these guys are being drafted at their ceiling right now. So yeah, I think it's going to be a tough sell for me, even though, they're connected for the next 4 years now with Joe Burrow. I agree with you, man. I'm going to have a hard time picking them in a best ball type situation when there's so much value elsewhere. Yeah, I got you right on the money there, Coach. What else you got on that situation?
Well, it's interesting because do you think that the Bengals are just going to decide to forfeit on defense? They just don't have any sort of they're not going to have any sort of they're spending over $250 million on 3 players over the next 4 years on offense. So what's their plan defensively and how does this make how does this affect you as someone who is I won't say fearful because you guys have been the top dogs in the AFC for the last 7 years, but this is the one team that's beaten you in the playoffs outside of Tom Brady. So, I ask you, what would you think? What do these moves make you feel?
Uh, well, I think that, the Bengals may have a situation here where, they have these 3 guys that are locked up for a long time. And it may just attract talent there based off of people trying to take some, potentially some lesser deals to get on a team like that could potentially, guys at the end of their careers, maybe looking for an opportunity to make a deep run. You might get some of those veteran discounts at this stage, depending on how the Bengals are doing. But I'm looking at this, this division there. It's a tight division when you think about it in the long scheme of things. The Ravens are a top team. They're always going to be competing there, and they have to keep up with them. And if they don't have a defense, there's going to be a lot of shootouts. So as far as like a fantasy perspective, as far as fantasy goes, I think this is a very good situation for a guy like Joe Burrow. His dynasty stock is just kind of, been pretty even keel, but now this could get him back into that top 5 conversation when you think about, his longevity with those guys. He's a pocket style passer. He doesn't run a lot, which, he could still put up those top end fantasy points. So his longevity might be there a lot longer than some of these other guys. So as far as fantasy goes, I like this move for Joe Burrow, not so much for Jamar Chase. And for Tee Higgins, I think it's just a lateral move. I don't know if there was anywhere he was going to go where he would be the number one prolific number one guy, getting the targets, getting that stuff. And I don't think he could actually turn in a role like that anyhow, with based off of his injury history and how much he's not been on the field over the years. I think this is the best case scenario for him, in my opinion. And as far as the Chiefs go, this is actually pretty good for them because, this is going to have to, it's going to weaken the defense of the Bengals long term, and it's going to weaken their team. Like these guys are making top dollars, and the teams that are making deep runs, you're getting team friendly deals, people that are taking less money because of that situation. And it's happening with the Chiefs at times. So until the Bengals can make that happen, which it could happen, but they're going to have to come out, and they've got a really tough division to get through. So this is a head scratcher, but obviously what Joe Burrow wanted was to have his 2 wide receivers there. And sometimes the squeaky wheel gets the grease, if you know what I mean.
Well, yes, when you pay your quarterback, Mike, you pay your quarterback $250 million and almost all of that is guaranteed, then he has a lot more power. The Bengals receivers also took it a step further with Tee Higgins firing his agent and hiring Jamar Chase's agent, who then had the leverage to say, we will not do a deal with Jamar Chase without a deal being done with Tee Higgins. So I ask you, if Tyreek Hill, Patrick Mahomes, and Travis Kelce would have come together like this in the same fashion in which the Bengals just did, is that something that you would have been interested in as a fan of that team? Or would you, obviously you're comfortable with the results of how things have worked out without Tyreek Hill. Do you think that this leads them to any sort of postseason success in the near future?
That's a good question. For me, I think that situation, if that would have happened to the Chiefs, when Tyreek left, I was kind of like, oh my God, what are we going to do now? And, our defense wasn't as lights out as it was. They're like bringing in Spags and him, really shaping the defense, them getting those, 3rd, 4th, 5th round defensive backs that have been able to plug and play over the years. I never would have, been able to foresee that kind of thing happening back then. But they are able to really develop their defensive unit, especially their cornerbacks and their safeties in-house. And then, guys like, Chris Jones and Patrick Mahomes, restructuring their deals, taking contracts that are, maybe they are huge contracts, but they're a little less, they're a little more team friendly than a Joe Burrow one would have been. So, and they're continuing to be restructuring. So until that happens, I'm not sold on the Bengals making that situation any better as far as making a deep run in the playoffs. I think they had their opportunity. And it might be out the window now based off of the amount of money that they're splitting with the Ravens and how good they are in that division. And you can never count out the Steelers. And depending on what the Browns do, I mean, I'm not worried about them, but that's a tougher division to be in. And I think they took a step back, taking all that money and putting it to 3 players.
I saw a funny aside on Twitter where it said, this is how an 8-year-old would build a team on Madden. And I think that is That's exactly how I feel about that situation.
Yeah, agreed. And it's an intense situation because there's so much money there. But I mean, great for fantasy football, I think. Great for Joe Burrow in fantasy football. But as far
Fantastic for Joe Burrow.
yeah, I think this is a huge, huge opportunity for, people to get in there, especially with, some of these younger quarterbacks in their sophomore year here coming in that are getting a lot of steam. Joe Burrow's kind of just been floating under the radar really. And, he could put together a really strong campaign here in 2025.
Now, while it is early, would you rather have the rushing floor that comes with a Jalen Hurts, or would you rather take the shot on Burrow going back to back almost 5,000 yards and 43 touchdowns again?
I'm taking the rushing floor because it's easier to attain. You're gonna have to come up with a Joe Burrow season that doesn't happen often. Like what 3 years ago he had a monster year. Then he dealt with some injuries. And I'm gonna go with Jalen Hurts in that situation, who's just been a steady top three guy the last 4 seasons. And that rushing floor, I was worried about him last year, and he really proved me wrong. The whole Eagles team, I faded kind of headed into 2024, and I'm not going to do that again. I'll tell you that because they just won the Super Bowl. They looked, lights out, and Jalen Hurts, silenced a lot of critics. He scored a lot of touchdowns on the ground, and he really showed his passing upside in that Super Bowl. So there's going to be some stronger competition in the NFC this year. So I think there are going to be some bigger games where they're going to need to fight back and forth in, and I'm just going to go with that upside with Hurts. And we know that rushing quarterbacks is where the cheat code is here. And as much as I like Joe Burrow, I still don't have him over those rushing quarterbacks. He's just back to where he was, headed into 2024 in my eyes.
Yes, I think he solidified himself more so as the elite omega level tier of pocket passers, being at the top of that list now. However, the rushing floor quarterbacks, the Josh Allens, the Jaden Daniels, the Lamar Jacksons, they all seem to have a bit more of a safe floor and the similar ceiling. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And that's why, I'm we're moving out of the pocket passer kind of quarterback in the NFL. In reality, there's very few and far of them. All these teams seem to be looking for some rushing upside. And that's what a lot of them bring to the table here. And if you want to get into the top five, it's going to be needing to really get that rushing floor up there. I think you really have to rush for a minimum of 400 yards in order to really get into that elite tier.
Yes, it is. Baker Mayfield did it. And I think that that is where Joe Burrow lands in a situation where he does perform at his optimum level or a median level where we get some of the spikes of just outlier performances.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're right there. I mean, Joe Burrow now is just that steady guy you can kind of really rely on week in and week out if he's healthy. Like he does deal with some injuries as well. And he may have to deal with injuries, even being a pocket passer, because, his offensive line isn't great. And it needs to, where's the money going to go now? Right. They, if they have a gap there, they're going to have to look for money elsewhere, and it's going to be tough.
The most dangerous part of this is we're projecting the cap to continue to go up by 27 to 30 million dollars every year, and if that stops, these deals become completely crippling if the cap does not go up the projected amount that it's going up. It went from 253 to 281 potentially this year, and it could go well over $300 million. If for some reason that does not happen, these deals will not be tenable for the Bengals organization, who are known as complete cheapskates historically.
Yeah, yeah, it may blow up in their face quite quickly here, and we're going to see that happen potentially if they start the season the way they did last year, right? So, yeah, let's go. All right, let's move on here. Let's get into the free agents here, Chev. But before we do that, potentially let's hear from the FastDraft promo here.
I am proud to announce that FastDraft now has an all-defense game called D-Up. That's right, fans of IDP finally have a real money best ball game that they can play. No more manually setting up leagues every time you want to do a draft. No. Now you can play for 10 grand, 2,000 to first. Could draft up to 30 teams, all defense. And the best part, balanced scoring, tackles for loss, pass breakups. It all factors in. Just draft 6 defensive players, top 4 into your lineup every week. It's that easy. It's so easy that this isn't just for IDP people. If you love the NFL, then you'll love this game. And for the first time with FastDraft, you can sweat both sides of the ball on Sunday. So use your host's promo code to get a $25 deposit match, and you'll love this D-Up contest because it's about time we got one.
Yeah, buddy. Let's go there, Chev. We've got, or Jeremiah, my bad. Coach, we got a long list.
I am Coach Retzlaff. I love
it. Let's do this. Great. Okay, let's get into the I'm just reading your private comment. It's pretty hilarious. All right, let's move on here, Chev, Coach, if you will, to the free agency. And we're gonna run down kind of the bigger moves that happened this last week, because there was a lot of them. Not as prolific as years past. There's no Saquon Barkley signing, there's no Derrick Henry signing, but we've got some notable re-signs to talk about, and let's get it going here, Chev. Coach.
Yeah. So, yes, I am Coach. And we're going to start in the NFC West, where there were some major moves made by the Seattle Seahawks. And the first move being Sam Darnold, the one who sees ghosts, and maybe he becomes a Ghostbuster, or maybe he gets busted by the ghost. He signs a 3-year, $110 million deal. Now, he goes out. What does this mean for JSN? They also signed Cooper Kupp to a 3-year, $45 million deal. So they've been very active, probably by far the most active team in the NFC West to potentially stay in that nebulous wild card, or maybe being able to compete for the division crown in 2025. So what do those moves mean to you, Mike, as someone who is watching these teams try to compete with your Kansas City Chiefs?
That was great. I think that personally, this move, it was a kind of a head scratcher to me to get Cooper Kupp over in Seattle. I think that was the biggest one. Very similar archetype to a JSN, plays a similar slot role, power slot kind of guy. He can, move all over the field. So I'm worried about, things in general here happening. Like the whole situation behind Cooper Kupp going to the Seahawks is a tough one for me to swallow. And we'll get Coach back on here. Coach, welcome back. What are your thoughts on Cooper Kupp going to Seattle?
It makes no sense. As someone who already had a power slot breakout, Cooper Kupp obviously on the decline, only averaging 10.6 yards a catch, and JSN earning 130 targets, 100, and turning that into 100 catches for over 1,000 yards and having a true breakout. I do not see why you would sign another slot receiver who primarily only thrives in the slot to this team. You needed a burner like a DK Metcalf, but you traded him. So I don't understand how this is going. You can't play both of them in the slot.
No. So what are you going to do with them? I mean, I think what they see maybe is how weak their O-line has been. And they're going to need to get the ball out really fast. And Sam Darnold, isn't quite the mobile quarterback to really move the pocket much. So, I think maybe they're looking at, these quick design plays off the line, potentially trying to get them, in a rhythm early, and maybe Cooper Kupp and JSN lining up on the inside. They're going to have to figure something out to get some speed on the outside, or a big body guy to win some of these contested catches, because it doesn't look good for them in the long-term scheme of things, in my opinion, because they pretty much got like a older JSN, and
Yes.
I'm just wondering what is going on there.
Yes. So head scratching moves by the Seattle Seahawks. We will move on to the San Francisco 49ers, who have not been extremely active. I mean, obviously, they have traded Deebo Samuel to the Washington Commanders, and in his absence, they have signed Demarcus Robinson to a 2-year, $9.5 million deal that is heavily incentivized for performance-based incentives. Along with that, they have traded Jordan Mason to the Minnesota Vikings. Does this clear a path for Isaac Guerendo, a RAS score legend? And we know how valuable those San Francisco backup running backs can be in Christian McCaffrey's absence. So, Mike, do you feel like this is a huge boom for Isaac Guerendo?
No, I don't. Not me personally. I saw what he did last year after all the hype. I was on the hype train for a long time. I was like, oh, this guy, look at his relative athletic score. He blew things out of the water. No prospect hit this in the last 20 years. I bit into that. And I see a little bit of change here. I see them drafting one, maybe two backs, potentially. They have Christian McCaffrey, obviously, and they're just a revolving door of running backs. So yeah, maybe Guerendo might get a run or some pull for a week or two, coming in as an injury replacement. But I honestly think they bring in, some competition in that backfield, and I see it through the draft happening. Honestly, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think that was trading Jordan Mason was just an excuse for Kyle Shanahan to get his hands in the cookie jar of this extremely deep 2025 running back class.
I love it. What else you got here there, coach?
Last but not least, we have the the Los Angeles Rams going and signing Devontae Adams to a 2-year, $46 million deal. Now, $26 million of that is guaranteed. So we have Devontae Adams, we have Puka Nacua, we have Matthew Stafford, we have Sean McVay. Have they just recreated the greatest show on turf?
Could have been. I think this is like I was not expecting this. Actually, a couple of weeks before this happened, I had Devontae Adams as a guy that I was staying away from based off his ADP, because through ESPN I was looking, he was getting drafted, like his ADP was around, wide receiver 12 headed into this season, and I thought, being on the Jets, unsure. I thought that was really a hefty price to pay. But at this stage now, we've seen what Matthew Stafford can do. He can definitely produce two wide receiver ones in that offense. And Puka Nacua is going to go off this year, and I just think this is a great opportunity for Devontae Adams. He could be a guy that is just going to go off. And I'm here for it. I think he's a complete upgrade over Cooper Kupp, who was fading in the last couple of years. Cooper Kupp really only played one full season when we think about it, and that was his record-breaking season. So I'm not expecting him to be able to play the full season. Devontae Adams is a great, solid contributor who seems to always play, and I just love this situation. I think this is going to be a really good call, and like I said, this NFC is going to have a little bit more competition in it. And, the Rams were the closest team to beat the Eagles in the playoffs this year. So they aren't far off of that. And they are only 2 or 3 years removed from a Super Bowl. So this could be, the grounds of a really competitive team and a very, very good, fantasy football friendly environment that we love and know of Sean McVay.
Yes, I feel like the current price on Devontae Adams in underdog drafts is the 4-4. So around that same range, you have Devonta Smith, you have Jamison Williams, you have Zay Flowers and DK Metcalf, all within the same realm of selection. So if that is going to be the case, Devontae Adams is a slam dunk, two hands reverse Zion Williamson 360 off the backboard choice for me at that range of players in the 4th round.
I didn't even know you knew that much about hoops there, Coach. That's pretty impressive there, rattling off all those players and stats. Well done.
Legendary sports knower Coach Retzlaff here.
All right. Let's move on to the NFC South and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who brought back not a free agent, but he would have been. Chris Godwin agreed to a 3-year, $66 million deal to stay with the Bucs after suffering a dislocated ankle in week 7 last year. Godwin was having one of his best years yet. At the time of his injury, the 29-year-old had racked up 50 receptions for 576 yards, 5 touchdowns, and he was in the wide receiver 1 category at the time. Reports suggest that Godwin turned down a lucrative offer worth more than $20 million from the Patriots, choosing instead to stay in a situation that benefits his fantasy value, our fantasy value. Turning down such a substantial amount of money and a significant injury is a bold move from the veteran, but it suggests he's confident in his recovery and he's confident in the team. So I'm looking for Godwin to have a big year again if he could stay healthy. Not great news for up and coming Jalen McMillan, who I think was a loser because of this, but he's going to be waiting in the wings maybe. But we know what happens. These 2 aging wide receivers, Godwin and Evans, chances are one of them are going to be missing some time, and Jalen McMillan is going to come in and do what he did last year. So I'm not too worried. I think this is a great move for the Bucs, and it's a great move for fantasy football. What are your thoughts?
I think that we saw the Chris Godwin career arc play out earlier in his career, and now we will see that career arc play out again with Jalen McMillan. Early on in his career, Chris Godwin could not get on the field over Adam Humphries and Deshaun Jackson when they were both Tampa Bay Buccaneers. However, when given the opportunity, he would then go out and dominate in real football, putting up over 100 yards on 6 receptions in 2018, in his first full-time action in year 2, I believe. So we've seen that. Now we've seen Jalen McMillan come out as a rookie and score 7 touchdowns in his last 5 games, becoming one of the only rookies since Randy Moss to perform such a feat. So while it is temporarily bad, we have seen promise from Jalen McMillan, and now we could just have some delayed gratification if you are able to go in and buy Jalen McMillan from a fantasy perspective. Now would be the time to do it because of the perceived downgrade in his situation.
Yeah, it was always the same situation. People were pumping his tires at the end of last year because of how he came out. And, if you listen to our shows last year, Biggs and I were talking quite a bit about, Jalen McMillan coming in and not being afraid, because once one of those guys goes down, there is such an opportunity for somebody to earn those targets. And McMillan can play the slot. He can play the outside. So he's very versatile. I'd like him play in the slot better than, the outside, but he can play both and he can be good at both situations. So it don't matter when they play 3 wide receiver sets, he's on the field and he's going to take people out for breaks and stuff like that. So his upside is still there. And like Chev or Coach mentioned, he's a buy right now because we know that can come back and get you. So let's move on to Rico Dowdle. All right. So, he didn't sign. He was looking for that big running back contract, but kind of a weird situation with all the depth at the running back position here coming into the draft. Not sure what Rico was thinking, being able to get a top, salary when you think about his draft capital, but he is now off to the Panthers. The undrafted free agent signed a 1-year, $6 million deal. So it is substantial money for a running back. He will team up with Chuba Hubbard to form a pretty good backfield duo. Dowdle made a name for himself last year with Dallas, consistently producing fantasy points, whether he was the lead back or in a committee. So he does bring some fantasy value here next year. In the 10 games where he played, at least 50% of the snaps, he hit double-digit fantasy points. 8 times and was even able to perform in games with lower snap share. So that is a good situation for Dowdle. He can be efficient with his touches. In Carolina, Dowdle's role alongside Hubbard, it looks promising, especially with the absence of Miles Sanders, who is now no longer with the team, and Jonathan Brooks' knee injury will be limited if he does play at all in 2025, but we're looking for him to return in 2026. So Hubbard is expected to be the lead back in the committee, but Dowdle's $6 million contract suggests that the Panthers will rely on him for a solid share of the rushing load, making him a potential flex option. And if Hubbard were to go down with injury, his touches could really skyrocket there. So Dowdle will have his boom weeks and provide steady fantasy value for 2025. The Panthers' emphasis of keeping their young quarterback, Bryce Young, protected could mean a high volume rushing attack. And that means Dowdle and Hubbard are going to be leading the charge. So I like this situation for both those guys. If they can avoid, the draft and them not bringing in another back, I think this is a good situation for both Hubbard and Dowdle. What are your thoughts there, Coach?
Yes, absolutely. So Rico Dowdle was never going to hit the free agency market and break the bank for a number of reasons. This being the foremost being him being a 5th-year breakout or 4th-year breakout, and the current running back class that is incoming. So he does what probably is best for his longevity, and he takes a role as a secondary option in a backfield where they are going to run the ball and they have an established primary option. Now, we saw last year him put up over 1,000 yards on less than 250 carries, only being given the workload towards the back half of the season, and he performed. So we have no questions about his ability. We just need to know what his snap share is going to look like when he spells Chuba Hubbard. And now the organization of the Carolina Panthers has some security after signing Chuba Hubbard to that long-term contract extension with Jonathan Brooks, their 2024 second-round pick, likely missing all of 2025 after re-tearing his ACL.
Yeah, it's not a great situation for Jonathan Brooks, and it's unfortunate, but that's the situation we're in. And I'm looking forward to seeing this Panther team next year. And another guy they brought back is Andy Dalton to really be that mentor for Bryce Young. We saw Bryce Young have a really good second half of 2024. I'm optimistic about his future with Dave Canales there. He seemed to have been the quarterback whisperer for guys such as Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield. And we saw the transition. I think Bryce Young getting pulled earlier in the season really helped him develop in that role. And we know that these quarterbacks, even if they're the first overall quarterbacks, some of them need time to percolate and get that next step. And we saw what happened to Jordan Love and his progression. And maybe that is kind of taking a step back now, but we know what Canales can do for these young quarterbacks. And I like the situation that they're in now. Bringing back Adam Thielen is another piece of the puzzle. They got Jalen Coker, who I know you're very high on this offseason. And, I could see them bringing in a big name wide receiver in the draft, or, seeing that play out. They're going to have some weapons there for Bryce Young, and they're building around him. So I'm anxious to see. Andy Dalton's going to be great in the background, giving him the mentorship that he needs. And I think they're building a really good, successful game plan around him. And it might be a year or two out, but you were looking at one of those mock drafts or that startup that Brian Hartman was doing on our group chat there, and you saw that Michael Penix was, you were really high on him, and then I saw Bryce Young, maybe about 10 spots down, and I'm like thinking maybe hold off, because I'm pretty high on Bryce Young, and I see them having a very similar trajectory, and I see a lot of upside there. So I'm going to be a little bit more bullish on him this year, even though he's bitten me in the past. But I like the situation that Canales has brought it in. And, they got some tools now around them, and a good, solid foundation.
We saw the growth of Bryce Young in real time after his benching. And to be completely fair to Bryce Young, he was walking into a situation with combat boots covered in dog shit last year. So,
Oh, goodness, yes.
we are now seeing what it looks like for him to have an actual professional environment surrounding him. And I think that your point about him being about 10 slots lower as a quarter in the draft with too much Brian, we saw that he's going later. And I think that is a tremendous value. I think Bryce Young also performed extremely admirably after the benching with that week 18 win coming at the Atlanta Falcons to keep them out of the playoffs. So we've seen the things from Bryce Young that you want to see in a young quarterback. You've seen him stand and deliver. You saw all of the things that made him the number 1 overall pick finally come to fruition in year 2. The problem that we have is the expectations that are set on a number 1 pick. If you are not a Joe Burrow where you see the immediate flashes, you're automatically a bust. And the timeline doesn't work that way for each and every single quarterback. So I think in 2025, Bryce Young will be a value in all fantasy drafts because he offered tremendous rushing upside along with his pocket passing and pocket mobility and deadly accuracy that he displayed coming out of the University of Alabama.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I'm right there with you there, Coach. And not much else action in this division coming down the pipeline. We're looking at Atlanta here, and they still have Kirk Cousins in their, on their roster. So we're gonna have to see what happens there. I'm assuming nobody's trading for him, and it'll be maybe a cut near the end here, and a desperate team, maybe like the Browns or something like that, will pick him up as maybe to put some pressure on the starter, or it could be an open competition. But as far as Kirk Cousins goes, it sounds like he's kind of washed. He's done unless an opportunity comes up down the stretch here. Let's move on to your next division.
Yeah.
Who you got? You got the NFC West,
NFC East.
East.
So we have 2 pretty active teams in signing players that no one is going to value for fantasy. In the Dallas Cowboys, they have been very active re-signing Kevontae Turpin. This was my favorite signing of theirs to a 3-year, $18 million deal. Now, only $6 million of that is guaranteed, fully guaranteed, as I understand it. But they keep the speedster who hit the top speed in the NFL last year at over 22.46 miles per hour in Dallas. And hopefully he gets a role that is more crystallized as they are struggling for pass catching options behind CeeDee Lamb. And then they move on to Javonte Williams signing a 1-year, $3 million deal. Again, this is probably not going to mean anything for fantasy because of the fact that Javonte Williams has just not been good for the last 2 or 3 years post-injury. And now with Zach Martin retiring, they have much more questions on the offensive line in spite of hiring one of the best offensive line coaches in the league in the offseason in Clayton Adams. And then you have Miles Sanders, who also signed there after stealing from the Carolina Panthers for 2 years. And Paris Campbell, who has never been relevant for fantasy purposes, signing there. Again, we need to find an option behind CeeDee Lamb to absorb defensive attention and targets. Moving on to the Washington Commanders, you have Jeremy McNichols re-signing a 1-year deal with the Commanders, as well as Zach Ertz re-signs just to block our happiness and keep us away from Ben Sinnott seeing snaps. And then you have KJ Osborne.
Can we actually get into the Commanders a little bit here? Because
Absolutely.
I honestly think that this is a huge upgrade for Jaden Daniels this offseason. I think he was quietly one of the biggest winners in my eyes. Getting Laramie Tunsil, left tackle, huge protection there. Deebo Samuel, that versatile weapon. I really do think that they're putting the pieces in place to make Jaden Daniels, and I'm being bold. I said it on a show last week that he's now my quarterback 1 overall in Dynasty. Because of these upgrades and the things that I'm seeing the Commanders do with him. And they're not done yet. They have some cap space still. They have draft capital, and I don't think they're done putting weapons around Jaden Daniels. I think they're going to bring in a top name running back, one of the top guys in the draft, and that's going to be the bruiser that's going to lead the way And I just see them really putting the forces around him to succeed as a rookie. 3,600 passing yards, 800 rushing yards, 35 touchdowns. That's a rookie, man. And his progression is there. And I know that there's some doubts about his size. It's always been his doubt, but Lamar Jackson was able to do it. He's been able to stay healthy. I don't see why Jaden Daniels can't do it. He's smart. And when he runs with, authority. He runs with purpose, and they're designed well. And I just think his longevity is going to be there. And everything that I've seen the Commanders do this offseason and last year, they're really, really into Jaden Daniels. And this could be the piece that takes him over the top here, Chev, or Coach.
Well, yes, Coach here. Very important to note that this is Coach and not Chev, the legendary ball knower. So I would like to point out that Jaden Daniels is now a part of a franchise that is actively trying to surround him with weapons to maximize the rookie window, where they can bring in as much talent as possible to chase a Super Bowl in a division with the defending Super Bowl champs. So adding a Deebo Samuel, adding Laramie Tunsil, and fortifying the offensive line are all things that lend themselves to the Washington Commanders challenging the Philadelphia Eagles for division supremacy and potentially becoming and taking that next step forward to being the number one overall seed in the NFC and earning the bye. I ask you, if you are on the clock, if Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels are both available, are you going to select Jaden Daniels?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I am. And in a dynasty league, I am. Yeah, absolutely. And maybe not in redraft.
In redraft.
No, maybe not this year. I think it might take some time for him to get his wheels under him with the new weapons he has around him. So it might be a slower start to the season. And I think he's going to have a very, maybe slow first 2 or 3 games getting accustomed to his new situation. And that might just take him out of that number 1 overall this year. But I think, a year from now, we're talking about Jaden Daniels as the number 1 dynasty asset out there, in my opinion.
I fully agree. I think that while Jaden Daniels has the promise and a similar rushing floor as a Lamar Jackson, you have now seen what the 99 overall version of Jaden Daniels is in Lamar Jackson.
Exactly. So I'm looking at him this year, still Lamar to be Lamar, and I think Jaden Daniels this is where the torch is getting passed off halfway through the year. Jaden Daniels is going to be talked about, and there's no looking back after what the Commanders are doing. So I'm getting him everywhere I can. I'm putting high value on him in 2025, but 2026, I think Jaden Daniels will be the undisputed number 1 asset in Dynasty headed into next year. So.
Yes, and that will pretty much wrap up the significant moves in the NFC East. The Philadelphia Eagles did sign A.J. Dillon to battle for quad dominance in the Philadelphia Eagles backfield with Saquon Barkley. And who cares? The Giants signed Darius Slayton to a 3-year, $36 million deal, but they do not have a quarterback. Tommy Cutlets will not be throwing passes in 2025.
Yeah, totally. All right, well, let's move on to the NFC North, and a couple of big moves by the Vikings, which kind of was a head scratcher to me because I thought they were going to come in and potentially peg, draft potentially 2 running backs in this draft. So I don't think that is going to be the case now because Aaron Jones is set to return to the Vikings on a 2-year deal, $20 million contract with $13 million guaranteed. That is not a small contract for a running back. And Jones had a standout 2024, setting career highs in touches, carries, offensive snaps while rushing for 1,100 yards, despite even battling injuries. The veteran Brack had previously signed that 1-year deal with the Vikings after leaving Green Bay last year, and durability was a concern. In 2025, he'll be looking to continue his strong performance, but there's going to be some competition in that backfield. Jordan Mason, I think, is an upgrade from what he had last year as competition, for Aaron Jones. So despite the durability concerns and recent dip of, efficiency, I think Aaron Jones is going to come in and be the number one back. And I see still the Vikings coming into this draft and potentially, drafting somebody, but they may not get that, prolific draft capital that I thought they were going to invest in a running back this year. So, maybe one of the mid-tier guys, maybe running back 12 or 13 off the board, potentially you'll see, to add to some depth in this running back room. Because Jordan Mason, like you mentioned earlier in the segment here, coach, that, he left San Francisco and now he's with the Vikings in exchange for a 2024 6th-round pick. So they didn't give up much. The 49ers, are now leaving that void, like you mentioned, in their backfield. But the Vikings now have got that potential next year. Jordan Mason came in for Christian McCaffrey last year and did very well in his absence. So the Vikings are looking to, Jones, Mason, similar style backs, but Jones can catch a few more passes. I think they're going to complement each other, and bringing in somebody maybe younger will be a situation worth monitoring. But as far as the Vikings go here, Chev, was this a surprise to you as well?
It was somewhat of a surprise. However, Aaron Jones played well enough for them to want to solidify having, when they were going to let Sam Darnold test free agency, you need a veteran back that understands pass protection to keep a young quarterback in the realm of JJ McCarthy, who will be seeing his first NFL experience. You need a veteran back there to sort things out from a pass protection standpoint. And there's no better back to pass catch and be a safety valve out of the backfield, along with being able to step up and handle blitzing linebackers than an Aaron Jones. So this signing makes a lot of sense because he wants to finish his career punishing the Packers as much as humanly possible, along with being in an ecosystem that's going to lend itself to light boxes with Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson taking the top off of the defense and TJ Hawkinson operating in the middle. So for Aaron Jones, this is a slam dunk, home run, grand slam signing, all of the sports euphemisms
In one.
one.
Yeah.
So yes, I love the signing for the Minnesota Vikings and Aaron Jones being a perfect marriage. Now it does move them down out of contention for one of the top running backs, in my opinion. And we're looking at more of the day 2 or day 3 running backs for them to bring in for a long-term solution if they don't view Jordan Mason as the long-term solution.
Yeah, I agree. Totally there. Now, you know what else is going on here, Chev? There's quite a bit of, or coach, sorry. I keep screwing
Coach,
up.
yes.
Yeah. Just, you seem so different today. That's all. Talk about the news desk. The news desk is popping these days. We are, putting out blurbs, 10 by the day, and it's an exciting environment. So if you haven't checked out the PlayerProfiler news desk on the website, check it out. You're going to get, breaking news brought to you by none other than Coach, by Chev, who's not on the show right now, by Biggs, and all of us on the news desk are pumping out articles and stuff like that. You're going to see a lot of us on the Player Profiler News Primetime as anchors. So be sure to check us out there. We are doing some really great things on Player Profiler Now Plus. So check us all out. If you haven't hit the subscribe button, please do so. We just hit the 1,100 subscriber mark on Player Profiler Now. So we thank everybody for tuning in and subscribing. Anything to add to that, Coach?
Yes, if you are interested in writing or contributing in any way, please reach out to us directly. We would love to teach you how to share the news with the community.
Yes. And Coach, you've done a great job getting the new writers up to speed and everything like that. So if you are new to writing, if you want to get into content creation, this is a great place to get your feet wet. And Coach is the great guy to get you going with it. So let's move on, Coach, to the AFC. What do you got for us here?
So we will start with the Los Angeles Chargers, who threw a wet blanket on the fire that was in the cement aisle for the Los Angeles Chargers to select a running back in the first round by signing Najee Harris to a 1 year, $9.5 million deal that is heavily incentive laden. That to go along with that, they signed Mekhi Becton, the literal Minotaur version of a human being, to play right guard along with Joe Alt. So they have fortified their offensive line even further. And now it crystallizes the picture that Jim Harbaugh will establish it in 2025.
Yeah, I agree with that there. And things are looking up for that division in general. What else you got from them?
So they also they bring back Mike Williams after a year just traveling around the world being yelled at by quarterbacks or being largely ignored. He signs back to the Chargers to give them a viable outside threat since Quentin Johnston has a glove full of Megan Fox thumbs and cannot catch the ball.
Great analogy there, Coach. You're bringing the heat tonight. You're up in your game, actually. Last week, the week before, you weren't coming up with these kind of bangers, but appreciate you this week there, Coach. Let's move on. Like, Mike Williams is just a steady name, reliable person. Somewhat reliable when he's in the lineup for Justin Herbert. I think he's going to be a safety blanket for a young team that probably needs some veteran in their wide receiver room to help these youngsters along.
Yes. So they're going to prioritize pass catchers, I feel like, in the 2025 NFL draft. And Mike Williams being one of the veterans that is completely familiar with the Chargers organization, if not this coaching staff, I think that allows them to maybe help him groom Quentin Johnston from being a colossal bust to actually being a reliable option. And if that cannot happen, then Mike Williams can step into that role and contribute for Justin Herbert. He does have familiarity with Justin Herbert already, having 1,000-yard season and several other successful seasons with him as the secondary option in that offense previously. So now he will be the secondary option to a Ladd McConkey while grooming Quentin Johnston.
Love it. All right. What about the Chiefs? What about my Chiefs here, Chev? What do we got? I mean, Coach, what do we have for that?
Yes, it is, Coach. So the Chiefs have re-signed Juju Smith-Schuster to a 1-year deal. So we also had them re-sign Hollywood Brown to a 1-year, $11 million deal. And the Chiefs signed Elijah Mitchell to continue to fortify the backfield. All of this to me says that they will be prioritizing running back in the draft in the second or third round, in my opinion. What do you think about that, Mike?
Well, I was more involved with that decision before they brought in. They signed Kareem Hunt again. They bring in Elijah Mitchell. These are kind of like these backup, very similar style running backs to what you have in Isaiah Pacheco. Now, I see a gaping hole on their offensive line, and yes, they need some protection. And there's not this offensive line class.
Gotta have protection.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you're bricked up in the cement aisle.
Yes. That's the only time you don't need protection.
Yeah. Well, you need protection from the bricks. That's for sure.
That's true.
Yeah.
So you need a hard hat.
Yeah. Wear your hard hat. Just the tip of it, though. All right. So let's talk about this Chiefs situation here then, because their offensive line is in shambles. We saw that in the Super Bowl. They lost a couple of key figures. Joe Tooney is no longer with them. Yes. He signed with Chicago. So they have some holes to fill. And I honestly think that with these running back moves, they are not looking for running back. I think they're going to be loading up on offensive linemen. I'm hoping that Josh Connerly slips to them at 31. And he's a guy that I've seen frequently mocked there. And that could be a situation. They have 2 picks pretty close together. I think they have 3 picks in the second and third round. So that could be, depending on where these running backs land. It really depends on how many go in the first round, in my opinion here. If Henderson, Hampton, and Genty all go into the first round, which I see happening in some of these mock drafts.
You do.
Yeah, depending on where Henderson go, people are really high on him, and you're hearing talk of people steaming him down because of that Jahmyr Gibbs factor. And there's going to be a team, I think, potentially in on that. That's the new wave of the NFL now. These pass catching backs, they have more longevity in the league. And I don't know if you listen to the Dynasty Life with Theo and Jim Coventry in the last release. Coventry was talking about how the defenses are lightening up based off of the linebacker stacks, and these running backs aren't getting hit on the line of scrimmage as hard because they're being pushed back a bit. So it's allowing these veteran running backs to have a little bit more stability and less wear and tear on them. And it's a trend he noticed over the last 2 years, and it kind of opened my eyes to this situation. So now when I'm looking at this running back class and I'm seeing some of these bruisers, these top end talent, and then I'm looking at these pass catching backs, I think that maybe Trey could sneak into the first round. And if that happens, it may steam up some of these other running backs to go in the second and third round, which I think may not be the case if a third running back doesn't get drafted in the first round. So it really depends on how this first round shakes up. And I think the Chiefs are really going to be attacking the O-line and shoring that up with the departures and how they looked in the Super Bowl and what they've done with their wide receiver room, bringing in these veterans, and then with the running back room, re-signing Kareem Hunt, getting Elijah Mitchell and Pacheco back there. Yeah, they may bring a rookie in, but I just don't see them investing a huge amount of capital in a running back at this stage.
No, I don't think it's going to be a top 60 pick. I think that you're more looking in the range of the Chiefs have pick 66 going back that direction more so than anywhere in the top 60 picks.
Yeah, fair. And I could see them picking up Bashal Tutin or DJ Giddens, these guys that are kind of versatile backs that can be the pass
DJ
catcher out.
Giddens,
Yeah.
DJ Giddens being right there in their backyard.
Yes, exactly. So I can see that happening. And
Or a Devin Neal.
Yeah, I love that situation because these are guys that are, one steaming up, the other one steaming down, and they're kind of evening out. So yeah, like I could see that happening. But we always know that it takes a while for some of these guys to get into an Andy Reid lineup too. So it may be a patience thing as well. So we're about an hour in, Chev. Let's speed through the last little bit here, Coach.
Yeah. So Raheem Mostert signs with the Raiders, and the big news here is Evan Ingram, a 2-year, $23 million deal with $16 million guaranteed. Sean Payton gets his coveted Joker role. And now we have another weapon added for Bo Nix going prior to the NFL draft. So what does that mean for the Denver Broncos and what you think they will do as your division rival in the NFL draft?
Oh, geez. That's a good question. Yeah, this is a weird situation. You never really know with Sean Payton what to expect ever with him and his teams. I mean, they came out, looked pretty slow to start the year, but they really were doing that to get Bo Nix involved. Putting his quarterback in a situation to succeed. I liked Audric Estime last year quite a bit, steaming him up. I see him maybe emerging as the early down 1-2 back, and then, using what they have in their arsenal. They may draft a guy too, which could be also a situation there, but you never know. And it's really hard to peg something until you see the preseason snaps, who they draft. He could play a role, but I'm not holding my breath there. I like Audric Estime to be kind of a guy that I think Sean Payton liked him near the end of last year, getting some steam, and a guy that he can rely on as the bruiser. And we know that he likes to have a complementary back to that, somebody lighter. Jaleel McLaughlin is still in the system. There was another guy last year who was a 5th round guy. I forget his name. Who's in their system too, who's similar to Jaleel McLaughlin as far as Watson. Yeah, Watson. They're very similar. So those are pass catching guys there. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out.
So one thing that they are telling you with their combine visits and their top 30 visit being DJ Giddens, is they are in the running back market after visiting with Ashton Genty, Amarian Hampton, Caleb Johnson, Cam Scatteraboo, Devin Neal, and Ollie Gordon, along with Brashard Smith at the combine. So they are heavily scouting the running back position and doing their due diligence. So I do expect them to add a running back in the NFL draft.
And the names that you're telling me right now, they may be looking at adding two,
Yeah.
because they're very different. You got a couple big bruisers, you know what I mean, and Ollie Gordon, and then you got a couple of these fast little small guys that could catch passes out of the backfield too, and Giddens and Devin Neal, like you mentioned. So yeah, I could see that being a reality for them to be drafting two guys, right?
Yes, I would prefer for them to just draft Brashard Smith, but that is the Chev slipping through. He has bled into my brain,
I love it.
and I can't believe that I said that while we were. Let's move on.
All right, let's move on. I mean, you could talk a little bit more about the Broncos, but I think we hit in that,
Too much
again.
Broncos talk will make everyone turn the show off.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about. I'm going to quickly get through the AFC South. One of the big names here was Christian Kirk. Obviously, he was released and then he was traded. We don't know what happened, but either way, he is now in the Houston Texans wide receiver room, and I think he's expected to slot in as a wide receiver 2 behind Nico Collins. I think this is a great fit for Christian Kirk in after what looked like to be the end of his career. Essentially, now he comes into a situation where, he's got a young quarterback who likes to throw the ball, needs a safety blanket, and Kirk could be in the slot role and play a pivotal role there. I'm not holding my breath because he's had, a lot of injury history, and his value may just fluctuate, but just based off of, who the Texans bring in. They may bring in more wide receiver talent. They are probably going to draft one as well. So overall, I think this is a great fit for Christian Kirk. I think this is a good situation for him to come out and really get back to what he was. I'm not, 100% sure he's going to get there, but we know that Tank Dell might not, play at all in 2025. So they got to fix that. Stephon Diggs still hasn't signed. That might be an option for Houston as well, but a lot of variables here. But bringing Kirk in, I think, is a good situation for them. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I think that we saw Stephon Diggs have success in that slot role for the Houston Texans in 2024. And now in 2025, they bring in Christian Kirk, who, when not hurt, was outpacing Calvin Ridley in 2023 and was commanding targets in 2024. But that passing game was broken under Doug Peterson. So Christian Kirk, who signed a 4-year, $84 million deal and was one of the most ridiculed players, now gets a chance to revive his oft-injured reputation due to injury because of – Jamie with a question here.
Is Kirk just a 1-year replacement for Tank Dell, or possibly they draft Ibuka? I like that. I have him sketched out a couple spots like Ibuka with the Texans. So yeah, Jamie, I think you're right on the nail here. I think they bring in Kirk as a maybe more of a depth piece, as maybe some insurance policy if they can't get a power slot in the draft, which I think they're looking for.
Well, he can 100% come in and be. He can 100% come in and contribute. I think they're going to add someone in the draft. I think that they've created some more needs for themselves in trading Laramie Tunsil. So I think that they're probably going to prioritize offensive line now in the first round. Whereas before I had them taking a guy like Ibuka or Trey Harris. So
fair.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. But I think Kirk could have real life fantasy value in 2025.
Yeah, he will. He certainly will. I think. I mean, and if he's starting, he's going to be on the field, and they throw a lot of passes. We know that already. So, CJ Stroud can throw 40, 50 passes a game any given week. So, that's a target share. If he gets 25% of that, that's 10 targets a game. That's not outside of what he was doing in Jacksonville. So
exactly.
Yeah, I think this is a good spot for him. And then another really good spot is Dyami Brown. I love this situation for him. He's a sleeper on my radar now after being, transferred over to the Jacksonville Jaguars on a 1-year, $10 million deal that could reach up to 12. He's headed to Jacksonville. That just offloaded Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk, like we mentioned, and Dyami Brown is going to slot in there and become a target, I think. And he had a good stretch of games at the end of last year. And I think he's a guy that obviously the Jaguars see something in him, and he's going to have an opportunity to come in and gain target share right away. He's going to have a limited competition for targets at this stage outside of Brian Thomas Jr. I see this being a year that potentially Travis Etienne is back on the radar here as a guy that we're going to be looking to target and talking about at the end of this year being a guy that, that offense with Cohen there is going to be looking at utilizing their running back in the passing game. And I think Etienne is going to, reap the benefits of that. Trevor Lawrence is going to have a decent season as well. And I think Dyami Brown is going to come in and get some value here. So I like this call. I think it's a sleeper pick this offseason. And I picked him up off the waiver wires in a bunch of Dynasty leagues this week, seeing that opportunity could arise.
Yes, Dyami Brown has never really had proper opportunity in the NFL as a reliable pass catcher, but when called upon, he was one of the more reliable targets as a deep threat for the Washington Commanders. Now he goes into a place in Jacksonville with a departure of a Christian Kirk, and he is able to come in and command targets, maybe in the Chris Godwin role in the slot and playing alongside BTJ, where BTJ is going to dominate and command the alpha share of attention and coverage. So Dyami Brown could absolutely be a sleeper that you should check your waiver wires to see if he is available on any of your leagues.
Absolutely, folks. All right, let's move on to Khalil Herbert, who is, he signed with the Colts. We know that their clear-cut running back is Jonathan Taylor. He's their bell cow. Steichen has shown that he will use Taylor extensively whenever the star back is available, fully healthy. So this is more of an insurance policy. Herbert, who's coming off a challenging stint with the Bears after showing promise in his first few seasons, now finds himself with an opportunity in Indianapolis to reestablish his value. We know that run-heavy offense will utilize their backup if Taylor falls to injury. And we know that is something that has happened in the past. So this could be some value here. Daniel Jones, is in that system now, and he's going to be threatening, that starting job. So this is going to be a really interesting situation here in Indianapolis moving forward here, Chev.
Yes, it's Coach. And I would like to point out that he is now the crystallized backup in my mind in the Indianapolis backfield because of the fact that Trey Sermon is not good at football, nor is Tyler Goodson. So Khalil Herbert has shown you that he is a more than capable runner. And in a run-heavy offense, Khalil Herbert could have some fantasy value if Jonathan Taylor is to miss any time.
There you have it. All right. I got one more. Well, I guess you got a division to head up. AFC East. Let's hit it up.
We'll go quickly here. Justin Fields signs a 2-year, $40 million deal with the New York Jets, giving them their quarterback of the interim. Now, $40 million is not a lot of money in the current quarterback landscape. So if this goes poorly, we could see the Jets re-roll in 2025 or 2026. And that quarterback class that will feature potentially Arch Manning, Lenoir Sellers, and Cade Klubnik. So moving on to the Bills, they signed Josh Palmer and re-signed Ty Johnson. I think the Josh Palmer signing is highly underrated because of the fact that they struggled so much with outside wide receiver play, with not being able to utilize Keon Coleman, their first-round pick. He was a first-round pick, right? Or was he second round? It was the beginning of the second round, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah, beginning of the second round.
So Josh Palmer adds a little bit of depth, and I think that he is a much better real-life player than what he has represented from a fantasy perspective. And they re-signed Ty Johnson, who Josh Allen called the best third down running back in the NFL. And very little fantasy relevance, but the Pastronaut, Josh Dobbs, and his shiny bald head have signed with the New England Patriots, along with the Barefoot Bandit, Mac Hollins, and they re-signed Austin Hooper.
There you go. All right, let's get into the AFC North, and the biggest one here was DK Metcalf, acquired from the Seattle Seahawks to the Pittsburgh Steelers for a second-round draft pick. That is, a shift towards a more pass-heavy offense in 2025, in my opinion. While the Steelers have the stability in their coaching staff, their quarterback situation remains uncertain. They have no idea who's going to be starting for them at quarterback at this stage, whether it's through the draft or signing, potentially bringing back Russell Wilson, or Aaron Rodgers has been part of the rumor mill at this stage. It leaves the situation here very murky, in my opinion. We don't know what's going to happen with George Pickens. His end of last year was a little bit of a shaky ride for the most part. He was seen on the sidelines, taking plays off. So we may see his role diminish even more now with Metcalf in town. I know the Dynasty DGens last night were talking about, them being able to work together and be good. I just don't see them actually playing on the same team very long. I see them moving on from Pickens at some point here soon, whether it's halfway through the season, near the end of this season. I just don't see the personality of George Pickens getting along here, and I see him on the way out. What are your thoughts on that?
I 100% agree. I think that George Pickens will get traded to the Carolina Panthers, where he will sign a short-term extension.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, that would be a good spot for him. Like we mentioned, somebody that can open up the with some speed along the edge, that can win some contested catches. That would probably be the perfect fit actually for them, if Canales can, rein him in a little bit on his attitude, because that's going to be something that's going to plague him forever. We talked about Tee Higgins already in Cincinnati and Jamar Chase. DeAndre Hopkins signs a deal in Baltimore, so adding some stability there to their wide receiver room that really needs somebody to help step up and guide these youngsters, and Rashad Bateman and Zay Flowers. And then Kenny Pickett is potentially the starter in Cleveland at this stage. So a lot of situations going on right now, but they're bringing in a guy that has some NFL experience that could push the starter, whoever that may be, in Cleveland in 2025. Their coach, I got that one right at the end of the show. It only took me an hour and 10 minutes to get your name right. Jeremiah, appreciate you coming in and filling in for Coach.
Well, I have been bricked up in the cement aisle this entire time, so if it is any longer, I may have to call my doctor. Thank you for allowing me to come on the show with you.
Yeah, man, it's been a slice. It's been a great show. We're going to have another Player Profiler News primetime show. I know Jake is going to be bringing the heat on Thursday, most likely, or tomorrow. There'll be another episode. So stay tuned for all the latest news on Player Profiler Now Plus channel. Remember to like and subscribe, because we are growing. Our team is growing. And like Chev mentioned, or Coach mentioned earlier, if you are interested in becoming a content creator, reach out to us and we will get back to you on that note. And yeah, Coach, bring us home like you always do with a great analogy.
Well, my father always told me, if you shake hands with a man sitting down, you also can never trust that man to not pee sitting down. Have a great night, everyone.
Have a great night, everybody. Peace out.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to PlayerProfiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, Data Analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.